Hello, I'm Chris Athanas. I'm a KMP developer. Tech support says they're coming out to close that thing up, which we'll see if they do. Today I'm gonna be responding to this video by Ainiro. He's from I think middle Eastern European, somewhere like Russian, Belarus, somewhere in that area. Czech. I'm not sure. Don't get mad at me if I forget it wrong. But we're gonna be discussing a key component of adventure-driven development, which is you have to keep the team sizes small. You have to keep the team sizes small because of Price's law and Metcalfe's law, but in the friction side of it, not in the adding value to a network or a market or whatever, but adding friction to communicate to the number of people what's going on. Because, well, let's let this Einro guy talk about it. He uses an example of five wives. Ooh, some people think that's great. Like, oh, five wives would be so awesome. But if you've ever been married, yeah, it's not awesome. It's a lot of headaches. So, but I think what he's trying to say is what he's using here is Brooks addendum, which is the bearing of a child takes 9 months, no matter how many women are signed. So that means you can't take nine women and in 1 month get a baby. That's just not how it works. So I think that's what he was trying to imply here. But I guess maybe Eastern European humor is a little different. So let's listen to what he has to say.
In the early 1970s, Fred Brooks formulated what arguably became the closest thing we've ever been to a natural law in software development. Fred Brooks said in his famous book Mythical Man Month, one man can do in 1 month what two men can do in 2 months. My personal experiences has taught me that the velocity of a software development project reduces by the square of the number of software developers you add to that particular project. Which implies if one software development project takes 1 month with one man, the same project will take 2 months with two men, 4 months with three men, 8 months with four men, and 16 months with five men, and so on.
So he's using a slightly different version of Price's law, but it's all the same idea. I mean, Price's law is not exact. Okay, Spurg's, which I am one of. This is not an actual realistic formula. Some teams you can get three are doing half. Some teams are doing four, doing half. It's not exact, but you can kind of over time see that this is in effect, right? And there's gonna be outliers, of course. It's always a statistical deviation, derivation. Nothing in life is actually mathematically accurate, but we can model it with those ideas.
Now, this is a very, very unintuitive realization until
Well, it's unintuitive for the preserver types who have been trained in the universities that every single system and all processes, no matter what they are, is just a manufacturing process. And it can be refined and broken up into pieces, and multiple people can be working on the same damn thing. And it'll create this efficiencies will come out of the system by breaking it up. So this is what they've been trained. Academia has not figured out, even though computer science has been around for 50 years, they haven't seen that this computer science thing is not really mathematics. It's not statistics. It uses those things, but it's not those things. It's more psychology, ethics, morality, art, culture, context, politics. It's actually more of that. It's actually more of a social science than the preserver types have been told. So they get into these organizations like, why don't you just do okay? In every other every other field of business, right? You can break a system up and you can create a baby in a month, right? You can take each vertical slice of the problem, have some specific person do that specific job, super efficiency. This is all manufacturing line, industrial stuff. It's old news. This is turn of the century 1870s technology ideas, and they haven't been updated because academia is still pushing out that all problems are just production. Well, all the problems you've seen so far, except for this new one called knowledge work, which is this discovery of processes, which is not a process. You can't make a process out of it. Now, you can backtrack and you can see how someone got there, but you can't go forward with it. It just doesn't work that way. And that's the problem that we're addressing with adventure-driven development, keeping the team size small, and we're going to continue on.
You realize that software development is not engineering. It is much more similar to art. And
Yeah.
many people have said the same thing. I'm not the first person to claim that software
Right.
development is not engineering, but it is art. And if you think about the task of, let's say, for instance, composing a symphony, that's obviously an artistic type of work.
Right.
Well, if one composer composes the whole symphony, then he has his vision in his mind. He doesn't need to communicate his vision. He knows exactly what tempo it should have and what the note it should end at on this.
Right. So if, as the orchestrator, he would be, if he had this team of people, which is not what I'm talking about, but in the orchestra, the orchestra leader of the symphony, the guy that's creating the stuff, is going to be in the center. He's going to be radiating it out directly, one way. We might have a little bit of two-way, but it's going to be each person. These people aren't really going to be talking to each other that much. It's going to be the central person. So that's what we're talking about with this is more art. So that's for playing instruments. And in this example I just gave, this is compute resources, right? These aren't actually people. These are compute resources with someone in the center telling each one of these compute resources, not a person, what to do. This is the example he's giving. Because in an orchestra, it's like the orchestra, the symphony leader, the orchestra leader, the guy writing the symphony, he has a single thing in mind. He's not looking for feedback. He has a single thing in mind. He's refining. He may get feedback from people, but that's not really where it's coming from. It's coming from up here. That's a side issue. That's the minor issue, right? It's all coming from one person's mind and then being disseminated to people in a notation where they can play it and don't have to understand where it came from. They just have to play it.
This particular section, etc., etc. Now, if you take 5 composers and you ask them to collaborate on composing the same symphony, then all of a sudden, now you need to communicate that same vision. And it needs to be grounded into the heads of every single 5.
So in this example, these are actual individual people, and every single person has to be coordinating with every single other person to create the thing, right? And as it goes up in number, especially past 5, 5 seems to be the limit, absolute limit. As soon as you get past 5, and they're not all kind of been friends for a while and on the same page, just gets no. That's why most organizations have 1 or 2 people at the top running the show, a creative type person and a more technical type person. And this one's doing well. They can be both creative in their own ways, right? So, but one's more like externally social, and one's more technically solution with this, how to actually technically create the solution. Like if we were back in the mechanic days, this would be the engine guy creating the engine, right? He's trying to put a new type of engine together, or he's hooking it up to the power plant or whatever. And this guy's actually getting the contract together with the financing people and the bank and the local sheriff and everyone else involved to make sure that this technical apparatus will actually run. So they both are needed, right? Sometimes it's in the same person, but very rarely. Usually it's 2 people, and they call the shots. And then as soon as you get to more like this, it starts to break down.
Composer, and then each of these composers needs to communicate with each other in order to make sure that they're transitioning from their part into the next composer's part painlessly, etc., etc. Now, once you realize that software development is art and it is not system engineering, you will intuitively understand that it is much better to have a single software developer implement the entirety of the project, whatever that project.
Yeah, this guy's hardcore. So he's been down in the pits, man. He has been down in all these things. He's been in the tunnels of fake Algebra Doom, the tar pits of seemingly good ideas, direct competition, dungeon slogs. He's been in a silver horde before. He's been doing other people's projects over and over and over again. And what he realized was after, because he's been doing this a while, right? He'll say how many years. And I've been doing it a while too. And only after you've gone through these things and still stuck around can you get to the point where you can kind of do projects on your own.
Happens to be than to add additional resources to that same software development project. And industry titans in every single major company on the planet has acknowledged this problem for decades, and they've tried to solve it with every single possible imaginable method they could imagine.
And what they're trying to solve is this thing where they want the preservers to have the attitude of the destroyer creator and still being able to take orders, which just doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. There's only going to be so many people that are going to be able to criticize something enough and have the skills available after refining them and still keeping at it, but not just giving up, because it's so easy to give up and stuff. It gets crazy, man. And a lot of people need to take. I need to take a break. I need to take a break for a while after I sold my company and do something else, right? So that's why I come back with this perspective. I've not really met anybody except for people like him that have been through this same kind of crap. And still sticking around wanting to deal with it, right? It looks like he's kind of taking a toll on his life. And, he's definitely, I think he's about the same age as me. He's like, so, oof. He needs to get a new t-shirt as well. But, what they're trying to do is like, how can we get the preserver types to be destroyer creators? It's like, you can't. You just have to really cherish and make an environment where a destroyer can come along and not be destroyed himself by trying to like be critical of things, and allow creators to come in and do the thing, which is just, these big corporations just can't do it because it's dominated by these preserver types who are like, no, you can't do your thing because it doesn't breed all those other things that I already have going on, and my friends haven't told me about it either. So,
for instance, Jeff Bezos has this rule that's called 2-pizza team, and what it basically means is that no software development team should be larger than that it is possible to comfortably feed on 2 pizzas. Which implies that at Amazon, there are no software teams that are larger than 4 or 5 people, basically. However, the problem is literally unsolvable. It's not even possible to solve.
Right.
And once
you're asking the universe to change this thing, and it's just not possible. It's just not gonna. It's just you're asking for the impossible. So quit asking, and just deal with it, right? Deal with the fact that there are going to be types of people who are destroyer creators, and there's going to be preserver types. And if you're going to be a destroyer creator, if you're getting vibing with this stuff, you're going to have to deal with these preservers and know what their personality and know how they act and how they respond. Now there will be people who will be early adopters who are like looking for stuff that's like, this has got room for improvement. They're looking for your solution, or it's unacceptable, and so they'll be on the early edge of it. And those are your early customers. Now after a while, they will not be your main customers, and you kind of have to let them go. And even though they're shouting feature, 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 you have to like, what do most people want in here? And how can I create a sustainable business that give the checklists and everything to these guys and make them maintain it for whatever while I go off and do more destroyer creator work? That's just how it works, man. And it doesn't even have to be like this industry changing thing. I mean, Woz went and started teaching elementary schools kids how to program computers. Awesome. I dig it. Most of the people be like, oh my God, you gave up Apple? That's billions of dollars? What's wrong with that guy? He's weird. I was like, no, he's adventure driven.
You realize that? You realize that it is much smarter to have one developer implement the entirety of the project if possible.
Right. And then what I say is like, okay, so he can do the whole thing himself, right? And it is possible now with the KMP tools that are coming available. You can do the whole stack yourself. But you do have to be a skilled developer. That means you're going to have to go down through this crap, man, until you get enough skill sets together and go, oh, okay. And what's the ones to throw away, which is most of the Jira, OOP, all the terminology you've heard of. You can just like let that go. Those are just suggestions. They may be useful sometimes. Maybe not for you. Maybe not this project. I mean, if you're, so there we go.
Than to add multiple developers onto the same project because of the added orchestration, collaboration, and communication overhead that this brings into the picture.
Yeah, this.
And the end conclusion of that is that teamwork is crazy.
Yeah.
Teamwork is...
Yeah.
I mean, teamwork is like, I don't even want to use the analogy, but, you want to have 1 wife or 5 wives. I mean, you want to have, how much more happy? Okay, happy wife, happy life. Well, if I have a happy life, if I have 1 wife, would I be 5 times as happy if I had 5 wives? No way.
Now, for the simps out there that haven't been married, this guy's obviously been married. The simps out there that haven't been married yet, it's terrible. 5 wives would be so wonderful. Sex all the time. Like, no, dude. You're totally missing the point of the analogy.
Okay, software development suffers from the same dilemma. And the only way you can actually solve Fred Brooks's problem is to realize that teamwork is crazy. When it comes to software development, teamwork is crazy.
Yeah.
And the only way you can actually build a sustainable company consisting of more than one single software developer is to have individual software developers working on individual projects.
Right. That's why on these teams, there's going to be like one core person that kind of does it all. And you might have a UI designer. You might have somebody doing the marketing stuff or doing some sales. And this might be a part-time person. It might be a full-time person, depending. There's no product managers. No product managers. There's no product managers. Everyone has to do something here. And maybe you have to I don't know, just have to keep the number of people. Like you can split this front end, back end, maybe, but these guys got to be pretty closely connected, right? And maybe you have an for KMP, you have iOS, Android, all the same. Is all the same one person now. So you may split that up. You might have one be more iOS side. Depends on what you're implementing. But it depends on what you're doing. But man, adding more people to the team, look how crazy the lines get. And if you add one more, it gets even more crazy.
Sometimes when you have larger projects, you can get away by deconstructing these projects into multiple smaller projects, ending up with like a microservice architecture. I hate that word.
You already have to be working at scale for this to happen. So when you're working at scale, yes, if you have 24-hour, if it needs to be 24-hour up, okay, then yeah, you have to have that. You have to have people doing that stuff, right? I get that. But to try avoid it if you can, especially the B is like, don't add more people until you've already got traction and more customers and servers, etc.
Because it adds complexity and you're not really eliminating the communication overhead and parts like that. But if you start segregating your larger projects into multiple smaller sub projects, you start thinking that way, then in theory it should be able to add more software developers to that larger project as a whole, as long as none of these individual software developers needs in any ways whatsoever to collaborate or
correct. Right. If they all have their own separate things, you all have an established API, they're all working through that static, which doesn't stay static, right? You may be able to get away with this for a little while, but eventually it's going to catch up, man. It's got to be one person that kind of knows how everything's put together, and they got to stick around.
Efforts in any ways with any of the other teams, where each individual team is basically a single software developer.
Yeah, he's pretty hardcore. But honestly, this is what I've seen. I've seen this work. Every company I've worked at that's been doing the ADD stuff has basically one person in charge. You might have someone doing graphic design, someone doing graphic art, somebody's doing documentation. Someone might, be doing that stuff, might do testing, but they're not going to be writing it alongside. It's very rare. Even the projects where I was split, I was like doing the UI and they were doing the engine. And they didn't know nothing about the UI, and I didn't really know much about the engine, but we talked together, and we were able to go back and forth and get the thing done.
And this is one of the reasons why I refuse to hire, because I don't want a team. The only thing I will accomplish by having a team of software developers is to double my costs and half my velocity.
Right. So I somewhat understand that. And then he's taking it as a life mission because he's so done with all these crazy environments that with the Agile and the Scrum and the meetings and all this, everyone has to coordinate and all the dicking around, the stand up, people talking about their dog and what they ate last weekend. It's no. So I understand where he's coming from. And it is something to consider if you've never heard of this minimal set of developers thing happening. Yeah, it's just another set of ideas. Give me a like and subscribe. I'm Chris, and I'm a KMP developer. We'll talk to you soon.